to go a lot further down the road of investment to create jobs and prosperity for all, not cut and allow these grotesque levels of inequality in our society to continue.
Well, I fundamentally agree with Jeremy about that. But Jeremy, in order to do it, we've got to win in Cardiff North. We've got to win in Nuneaton. We've got to win in Milton Keynes. We've got to win in Kingswood. We've got to win 100 seats from the Tories. We've got to get Tories and Greens and Liberals to vote Labour. And at the moment, they're not going to do that. At the moment, all of the evidence shows us that we are likely to be at 22%. Well, somebody shouts from the audience they voted for us for the mayor. They did. But I tell you what, I'm not satisfied with that. I'm not complacent. I think winning in Bristol, winning in London, winning in other parts of the country, it's great, but we were 18 seats down in the local elections. UKIP in power in Wales. UKIP in the Assembly, behind the Tories in Scotland. This isn't progress. We're going backwards, my friend, backwards.
OK, thank you very much. We'll leave that topic there. Thank you. Right. We have been having a bit of audience participation. They'll be glad to hear this is the next topic. Michael Brunwyn from Brantry asks, what are your views on the renewal of Trident? Jeremy Corbyn, I'll start with you.
I voted against the renewal of Trident.
We are timing.
I put it...
In fairness to yourself, I'll start again because we're timing. In fairness to Jeremy Corbyn and also to Owen Smith, if it happens, we are timing this. So if you can keep your applause for Jeremy Corbyn to go through its 40 seconds.
Do I get entry time for that?
Can we start again to make
yes,
sure that
I voted
every
against
candidate...
the renewal of Trident because I want to live in a nuclear-free world. And I think Parliament was invited to vote for a blank check to the government for renewal of Trident with no financial costing whatsoever behind it. The points I made, and I made them in the leadership campaign last year, were quite simply this. It was a Labour government that developed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in the 1960s. Article 6 of that treaty requires the declared nuclear weapon states, of which Britain is one, to take steps towards nuclear disarmament. Renewal of Trident is not taking steps towards nuclear disarmament. It's going in the opposite direction. And I want to be in a Labour government that fulfills our obligations and does everything it can to encourage other areas of the world to become nuclear-free zones, which has actually worked and been very effective, and carry out our obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Thank you very much, Jeremy Corbyn. Thanks. And I appreciate you keeping your applause to the end there, just in fairness to the candidates. Owen Smith, where do you stand on the renewal of Trident?
Look, my great political hero is Aneurin Bevan. And I am a Bevanite on the issue of nuclear weapons. I'm in favour of a world without nuclear weapons. I'm in favour of the Labour Party being in the vanguard of looking for multilateral disarmament. All weapons across the world should be got rid of. Now, if I sincerely believed that I would assist multilateral disarmament, everybody getting rid of their nuclear weapons by divesting ourselves of ours first, then I would do it tomorrow. I used to believe that, but I don't believe it any longer. I believe the world has become a more dangerous, volatile place. I believe Russia is a more dangerous power than it used to be. And my view about this is very clear, that we must retain a nuclear deterrent in order to enable the multilateral disarmament of the entire world's arsenal. That is the unfortunate, terrible truth. Jeremy and I just disagree about that, I'm afraid to say.
This is a very emotive topic, I appreciate, but it would be good to have a good discussion on it, because we do have two candidates on opposite ends of the debate here. Jeremy Corbyn, do you want to respond to that? Does it make us vulnerable if we don't have nuclear deterrent?
197 countries in the world do not have nuclear weapons. There are 5 declared nuclear weapon states. In addition to that, there is nuclear weapons held by India, by Pakistan, by Israel, and by North Korea. The six-party talks hopefully will help to bring about some kind of security on the Korean Peninsula, and also pressure from China would help to do that. Promotion of a Middle East weapons of mass destruction free zone will help to bring Israel and Iran eventually, a very long way off I'm sure, but bring them to the principle of that. So I simply say this, that if we spend all this money on replacing the Trident nuclear missile system, what's the message we're giving to the rest of the world on this? Would it not be better if we redoubled our efforts through the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, encouraged other nations to go in the same direction, but also ask ourselves the question, under what circumstances would you use it? Secondly, are we aware that it is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction that indiscriminately kills very large numbers of civilians? And the security issues that face this planet at the present time, are any of those security issues actually going to be solved by the use of nuclear weapons? Or are they going to be solved by political action, by political dialogue, by promotion of human rights, justice and democracy in every single part of the world, and of a foreign policy that puts that as the headline figure rather than the last part of the page?
We're all aware of the appalling consequences of any country in the world using nuclear weapons. That is why we should all want to get rid of all nuclear weapons. The only point where Jeremy and I disagree is how we best achieve that. And we do disagree about this. Now, Jeremy's view is one I held 25 years ago, which was we get rid of ours first as a gesture, and we encourage the rest of the world to do likewise. But I say to you, Jeremy, I think that is unfortunately naive. I don't believe that we will encourage the rest of the world to do it. I do believe that we have appallingly allowed successive governments, multilateral disarmament, to fall away from where it ought to be at the forefront of international diplomacy and debate. We both want to put that back on the table. But I think we are better able to do that if we come to that table with a bargaining chip. If we throw that bargaining chip away, then we lose out the ability to ask other countries to get rid of their own weapons. Okay. That's just, I mean, right. we can
What do you say to those
this.
countries that don't have nuclear weapons and don't want them, to countries like South Africa, Argentina and Brazil that have willingly given up their nuclear weapons in order to live in a safer world? They have the moral authority to do these things. And surely you and I can both agree that security issues that face the world are not going to be solved by the detonation of a nuclear bomb, which would kill millions, which would drive the whole world into recession and create an environmental disaster, not just in the area where that bomb went off. Listen, I've met people who were victims of nuclear testing on the Pacific Islands. I've met British victims of nuclear testing. Those people all say a nuclear weapon is totally indiscriminate. These were innocent fishermen living on islands in the Pacific who are now suffering terminal cancers as a result of those tests all those years ago.
Nobody is going to contest how awful these things are. None of us are going to argue with that. It's evident to everybody across the planet how dreadful these things are. But South Africa is a great example. They got rid of their weapons unilaterally, and the rest of the world did not disarm. And we are not South Africa. We are one of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council. We are one of the great powers in the world in security terms. And for us to powerfully go into the debate with other countries and push for multilateral non-proliferation and disarmament, I think we need to be able to say to those countries, look, we are progressively disarming ourselves, but we need to have a powerful argument to make that we've got ours and we will get rid of them in exchange for theirs. It's a basic fact of bartering and negotiating. You used to be a trade union negotiator. You should understand that you've got to have power going into a negotiation. Bevan absolutely understood it. I understand it, and I think that's what we should be doing in order to get rid of the entire world's arsenal of nuclear weapons.
When I've been to when I've attended nuclear non-proliferation treaty conferences and humanitarian effects of war conferences. I tell you, the countries that come there are from all over the world. They're very interested in living in a nuclear-free world. Yeah, they listen to some extent to what we're saying, to some extent what Russia and the USA and China and France are saying, but they listen far more intently to South Africa, to Abdul Minty, their nuclear disarmament negotiator, about how you can practically bring about fissile material cut-off, how you can bring about an end to the testing at any level of nuclear weapons, and how you can really seriously bring about a nuclear-free world. And they say to me, well, why, if your country is so keen on bringing about a nuclear-free world, are you proposing to spend a very large sum of money, let's say 100 billion, on the replacement of Trident? They just look at us and say, why are you doing it when you've got so much to give to the world of your human rights tradition and your democratic traditions?
Jeremy, I wish I could agree with you about this. I really do. Because if you were right, then I think we could make the world a safer place more quickly than we would be able to under my plan. But I don't agree with you. I don't think that America and Russia listen more closely to South Africa in respect of nuclear weapons than they do to us. I just don't think that's right. And that speaks to my point about this perhaps being an idealistic position and one that we might all aspire to, but I just don't think it's the credible position. I don't think it's showing leadership for us within the world, and I'm afraid we're just going to have to disagree about this.
Okay, and on that note, we will leave that subject. On to the issue of immigration, and this comes from Charlie Mason in Pembrokeshire. I'm sure both of you condemn racism and xenophobia as much as you promote the economic and social benefits of immigration. But do you recognise that people, communities and areas in the UK feel uneasy about immigration? And if so, what will you do to reduce this unease? And I'll start that with Owen Smith, please.
Well, I'll tell you the first thing I won't do. I won't do what Theresa May did and trail racist ad vans around the country in order to whip up hatred and intolerance and division. And I won't do what Nigel Farage did, which was stand in front of those racist posters. And it's been heartbreaking, I think, in recent months, especially during the Brexit campaign, to see racism and intolerance and all sorts of other divisions emerge in Britain. But what we've also got to do is acknowledge that there are pressures that immigration brings, and we've got to deal with them. And we deal with them through investment. There are pressures on doctors and on hospitals and on school waiting lists. All of those things are affected. If we invest through a British New Deal, we would mitigate many of those pressures, and people would be easier in this country about immigration.
Jeremy Corbyn, do you recognise the unease, and what will you do?
I do recognise the unease, and I do recognise the need for funding in areas where there are problems over school places, about health facilities and housing, through the implementation of a migrant impact fund, which this government has abolished, actually. It was set up by the last Labour government, and refused to access EU funds that were available to assist with those issues, and I think it's very important we do that. Secondly, recognise that we do live in a multicultural society, and we have benefited, all of us have benefited, from the brilliance of people that have made their homes here, made their contribution to our society, helped to run our health service, education service, university, science, and so many other things. Fund the communities properly, fund the services properly, but absolutely turn totally against any kind of racist troll of any sort within our society.
Thank you very much. So you're agreed in acknowledging the unease, agreed in the need to tackle it with some sort of fund. What about controlling migration numbers? Owen Smith, you can start with this again.
Well, look, I think we have got to have an honest look at this issue and an honest conversation with the British people, because many people in that referendum vote were concerned about immigration. We know that from the polling. But I think for us in Labour, the first thing we've got to do is say, our values are values of tolerance and solidarity. And we are an immigrant nation. My family come from England and Spain. My wife's family come from India and Scotland. This part of the world where we're standing here today is made up of immigrants. So we've got to, I think, be proud about the mixed heritage of our country. And truthfully, if we weren't going through the worst recession we've seen in generations, if we weren't seeing a Tory government cutting back through austerity and all of the service that all of our communities rely upon, if we were investing properly, then we wouldn't have the volume of problems that we've got about immigration.
Okay, can
the
you
intolerance
address the
wouldn't exist.
control
And
element?
that means, crucially, we've got to be in power. I say it again, all of this comes back to Labour being in power, and we are not in power. We're not in power.
Would you control... The question I asked was, do we need to control migration numbers?
We've seen the Tories play a losing game of setting targets. They played a losing game. Well, I'm not going to turn around and say, let's have a finite target for immigration, because we know it doesn't work. You miss those targets. Many parts of our country require immigration. The nurses in the hospitals. Over the road from us is the Heath Hospital in Cardiff. It's full of foreign nurses.
So
now,
we
the
need a
truth
degree,
is,
but do
if
we
we
need to control the level of it?
Well, I think we need to be honest, which is we do need immigration in this country, and in some areas of the country it causes problems. So our job is to form a government in order to mitigate those problems. It is not our job to inflame pressures and inflame divisions in the country.
Control or no control?
I've just said to you, I don't think we should be setting a finite number. But the truth is, we're about to leave the European Union, and that's not going to solve the problems. We should be in Europe fighting for everybody across Europe having a greater degree of control.
The audience can draw their own conclusions. Jeremy Corbyn. Should we be controlling the numbers?
Non-European migration is very strictly controlled, often actually very unfairly, particularly where it's a case of family reunion, where arbitrary levels of income are demanded of a family before they can bring children or partner into Britain. I think that needs to be looked at and changed. In the case of European migration, if we're part of a single market with free movement of capital, then what goes with that is free movement of labour. What I've done all through the referendum campaign and before that and since is to demand the signing of the Posting of Workers Directive to prevent the importation of a whole workforce to undercut a workforce that's already here in this country and destroy the wages and conditions in that particular industry. And I've raised this with colleagues all across Europe. The British government finally did concede that it would sign the Posting of Workers Directive. I think bringing about a greater level of economic equality across Europe would actually have a very big impact on that. But Owen's right. We've got to recognise that without migrant workers, we wouldn't have the health service we've got, we wouldn't have the education service we've got, or many other things. And when Farage, in the referendum campaign, produced that utterly disgusting poster, which showed a group of people, desperate people, in that desperate group of people, there were doctors, there were engineers, there were nurses, there were scientists, there were farmers, people fleeing from a war, and he says they are the threat. Surely we can have a hand of humanity rather than a hand of abuse, which that's a
So to summarise that, because in fairness, I did go after Owen Smith. So to summarise that for Charlie Mason, is that a yes, is a no, is it a halfway house? Where are we standing on
There
this?
is control of non-European migration. There is obviously control of that. For European migration within a single market, I think there has to be a harmonising condition. There has to be a preventing of the undercutting of wages. That will indeed reduce the flows. But also remember, there are 2 million British people that live in other parts of Europe. They work there, they contribute there. They want to stay there just as much as the European nationals that have made their homes here want to stay here, and I think they should.
Owen Smith.
I just want to say that, have you seen what Theresa May has done since she won in respect of refugees into this country? On the very first day she took office, she scrapped the post of Minister for Syrian Refugees. On her second day in office, she reintroduced child detention for child refugees in this country. That is what the Tories will do. And it should be a salutary reminder to us that unless we are able to form a Labour government, we have to sit by and watch this happening. We have to sit by and watch them fan the flames of hatred and division. And that cannot be allowed to continue. We've got to get to the prospect of a Labour government as soon as possible.
Jeremy Corbyn, do you want to summarise your response to this, and we'll move on then to the next point?
The issues of refugees is a huge one. There's more displaced people than at any time in recorded history all over this planet. And the idea that you can solve it by building barbed wire between Greece and Macedonia and think the problem's going to go away, and then be concerned when you see people dying in the sea, children dying in the sea, any more than the horrors of those camps in Calais and Dunkirk, which I visited. So let's have a humanitarian and human response, which is about giving immediate help and support. Thank Italy and Greece for what they've done and tried to do, but also really redouble our efforts to try and bring about a political settlement in Syria so that those refugees can actually return home.
Okay, thank you very much to you both there. Okay, this question comes from Thomas Burke in Birmingham. And Jeremy Corbyn, I'll ask you to begin on this one. What will you do to combat anti-Semitism, specifically in the Labour Party, and all those whose behaviour or rhetoric legitimises anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is totally wrong and totally unacceptable in any form, in any place in our society, and it absolutely has no place whatsoever in the Labour Party. When I became leader, there were allegations made, and a number of people had been and have been suspended from party membership, so that investigations can take place into what they are alleged to have done or alleged to have said. I appointed Shami Chakrabarti to undertake a serious inquiry into this, and she did that with great diligence. She did it in 2 months. She produced the report, and it was put to the National Executive, and there are a number of rule changes that are put in there. She also said that in addition to sanctions against anyone that commits any kind of racist act, there should be an education and an inclusion process within our party. Anti-Semitism is simply totally wrong and not acceptable.
Thank you very much. Owen Smith.
Anti-Semitism is one of the most pernicious forms of prejudice for all sorts of reasons that we fully understand. And it has been absolutely appalling to see our party, the Labour Party, with anti-Semitism in our ranks. It's been absolutely disgraceful. And I'm very clear about this. If I were the leader of the Labour Party, I would have zero tolerance for it. Zero. Anybody found of anti-Semitic abuse in our party would be out of our party, and they would not be coming back. No short-term measures, no short-term suspensions. They would be out, and they would never come back into the Labour Party.
Jeremy Corbyn, do you want to respond to that?
Every case must be investigated. Every case must be investigated, as indeed should any form of racism whatsoever within our party or within our society. That is exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what the party position is. That's exactly what I hope the rule book will reflect, to ensure there is a due process of incontrovertible investigation of every case. And I agree with Owen, where a case is proved against somebody, then of course they don't have a place within the party.
Okay, thank you. Owen Smith, if you could summarise your response, please.
Well, look, I'm very clear about this. Of course all cases have to be investigated, but we've been too slow. We've been too slow to look into this. We've been too slow to acknowledge that we've got a problem in the movement. And it is in the Labour Party that we've got a problem with anti-Semitism. Now, this should make us all ashamed. Everybody in this room should be ashamed that in the Labour Party we're talking about dealing with anti-Semitism. Now, I ask you this, Jeremy. How has this happened? How has this happened under the last 9 months? Because it is growing. It is growing in our movement. I suspect it is because many people in our movement are very worried about their communities, but I just don't think we've done enough to stamp it out. I don't think we've been strong enough. I don't think our leadership, collectively, I don't think our leadership has been strong enough in stamping it out.
Smith, Jeremy Corbyn, I will let you respond, but there's a question been raised. Owen Smith, how do you respond to the point?
I've made my position on this absolutely clear. That is why I wanted an inquiry done into it. Many of the cases that have been investigated actually predate my leadership by quite a long way. And so I wanted action to be taken on it. I want our party to be the inclusive, open, welcoming place for everybody, whatever their faith, whatever their ethnic group, whatever their community they come from. That is surely what the strength of our party is about. 19 people have been suspended from membership and investigations are ongoing. Rule changes are coming forward to ensure, which you and I, I'm sure, would agree with, there is a proper independently monitored form of investigation of what goes on within the party. You and I absolutely agreed. Racism has no place whatsoever in our society or our party. Let's leave it at that.
How do you respond? How do you respond? There was a point raised in the audience, and it's something else that's been raised in the media as well. How do you respond to this criticism that it's a witch hunt, that it's political point scoring, as opposed to...
Catherine, I've been in this Labour Party for 30 years. I've only remembered in the last 9 months a discussion about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. That's the truth. That's the truth. It's in the last 9 months that we've been dealing with it.
Can we hear Owen Smith,
Now, I'm not
please?
sure why that's come about, and I don't blame you for it, Jeremy, but I do think we've got to do more to deal with it.
Excuse me, can we have a bit of peace and quiet?
This room is an indicator of it in some regards. We have... You know, Jeremy says he wants a comradely debate. We are not behaving like comrades to each other in this party right now. We're not. Too many people are telling us in our CLPs that the debate is ugly, that they feel intimidated, that there is an abusive dialogue between different wings of our party. We've got to heal the Labour Party. We've got to unite the Labour Party. Otherwise, we will never win. We will be split and we will lose. And the Tories and those people who are racist in this country will benefit.
Right, thank you very much for that. We'll leave that there, if that's okay with you. Right, on to the, and it may well be the final question for this evening, depends how we go now. This comes from Helen Evans in Oxford. What are your plans for ensuring the UK's third female Prime Minister is Labour and not Conservative? Owen Smith, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, look, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that the Labour Party has got a far better record on promoting women within our ranks than any other party. 40% of our MPs are women right now. It's 20% in the Tory party. They may have a First Lady, but they always put women last. That's the truth of the Labour Party. Now, here in Wales, we've been ahead of the curve. Here in Wales, we've committed to having 50% of our councillors as women. I want to go further than that. I think 50% of our MPs should be women, and we should use AWS to get there. We should have 50% of our shadow cabinet as women, at least 50%, okay. And we should have at least 50% of the top jobs in the cabinet. The big offices of state, they should be women too. And there are more than enough women in the Labour Party to fill those roles. Let's look like the country.
Owen Smith, you'll have plenty of time to come back on that. Jeremy Corbyn, what are your plans for ensuring the UK's third female Prime Minister is from Labour and not Conservative?
Promoting women within the party, promoting the organisation of women within the party, promoting all women shortlists to ensure that we get that parity of representation in Parliament as well as at council level, and also driving down the gender pay gap and discrimination against women in our society as a way of promoting women. I'd also say that when I was elected leader, the first thing I did was to appoint a shadow cabinet, and for the first time ever, the majority of members of that shadow cabinet were women and will remain so.
Thank you very much. There have been concerns raised about misogyny within the Labour Party. Is it something that concerns you, Jeremy Corbyn, and what are you going to do to tackle that?
Yes, it does concern me if there's misogyny at any level in our society and obviously within our party, and that is part of a number of the issues that was addressed in the Chakrabarti report about the conduct of the Labour Party, its organisation and its meetings, and the way in which we organise ourselves, which sometimes makes it very difficult for women to be as involved as they would want to be and should be within the party, our campaigning methods, our presentational methods, and a very large number of other things. We need to strengthen the role of women within the party at every level, and that I'm determined to do.
Owen Smith.
Well, I agree with Jeremy about all of that. We in Labour have been standard bearers for feminism and for women for a long, long time, and we stand out in our society. There's just 5 of amongst the FTSE 100 top companies, there's just 5 that has a woman as chief executive. As Jeremy says, there's a 20% pay gap between the money earned by women and the money earned by men. Now, I look at my children. I've got 2 boys and a girl. And I think, why on earth, how on earth, is it morally justifiable? Is it economically sustainable for my daughter to have the prospect of being just as bright, just as able, and earning a fifth less than either of my sons? We've got to change that. We've got to change all of this in our society. And the Labour Party can show that we're better than the rest. We have shown that we're better than the rest. I've been proud that in Wales, where we've had difficulties with all-women shortlists, I know I was at the heart of some of those, but we've turned it around. As Shadow Welsh Secretary, we turned it around. And the Assembly, the Labour group in the Assembly, is a beacon of hope for women.
I did ask Jeremy Corbyn about concerns about misogyny. I did ask Jeremy Corbyn about concerns about misogyny. There have been some concerns about your use of language in recent weeks. How can you convince us that you're in favour of promoting women and so on when that sort of language is used?
Well, by what I've just said, if I am the leader of this party, then I am absolutely pledging to this party that I would promote women, that I would use all-women shortlists until we had 50% of the Parliamentary Labour Party. I would guarantee that at least half of my shadow cabinet and the top jobs in my shadow cabinet, at least half, would be women. I would fight day and daily for women, as I have done. 80% of the cuts under austerity, in particular the tax credit cuts that we overturned, fall on women. Most of the cuts to disabled people have fallen on women. Women have had a terrible deal from this Tory government, and I fought it at every turn, and I would continue to do that day and daily if I were the leader of this party.
OK, Jeremy Corbyn, you want to come back on that?
Owen's figure is correct that 80% of cuts fall disproportionately on women. And indeed, after the first Tory budget, we did an analysis of the effects of that budget on women, and it is devastating. It's terrible what is happening because they all disproportionately fall on women. That's practical work in opposition to show that. We also have to drive down the gender pay gap, but also end the idea that certain jobs and certain professions are reserved for one gender, not for the other. And so I organised with Chi and Awoma a very interesting event in Parliament in the summer, which was of women engineers being invited to Parliament. And I talked to some of the older women who had studied engineering 20 or 30 years ago and said how lonely it was at college or university when they admitted, I want to be an engineer. I said, what do you want to be an engineer for? You're a woman. They said, well, I want to be an engineer. My mother taught me all of this because she was very keen on science and people learning engineering and all those skills. So you have to start at the beginning in schools, making sure nothing is debarred to the girls as well as the boys. Deal with the issue of gender pay and inequality, and deal with the issues of glass ceilings and discrimination that go with it. It's not just about women in the boardroom, women in Parliament, or women councillors. It's also about day-to-day life, the way in which women lose out on career opportunities because they've taken a year or two off to have children in their 30s and suddenly find that all the career opportunities they thought were there suddenly disappear. We need very tough legislation to prevent that happening. And also, in companies, we need to end the sort of social network of early evening discussion groups when aspirant candidates with different positions in companies come together. Who's not there? Younger women who want to be looking after their children. The men should also be at home looking after their children.
Owen Smith, summarise your response now, please.
again, Jeremy and I are at one on this. We've got to end maternity discrimination. We've got to end the gender pay gap. It's 46 years to the month that I was born, and Barbara Castle put through the original Equal Pay Act, a great beacon for women in this country. But we need another Equal Pay Act. We need to use legislation in Parliament in order to narrow that gap. We need to change the laws of this country in order to outlaw discrimination against women. And to do that, we've got to be in government. We've got to be in government. And I'm not happy with us looking never further from being in government. It's very simple. We've got to win, Jeremy. We can't just talk about it. We've got to change it.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy Corbyn.
Well,
to close
Owen,
this discussion.
Owen, I thought we were moving into an area of agreement there. Can I just ask you one question, which I'm sure you will agree with? Do you agree with me? The most instructive shadow cabinet meeting we had was when we went to Dagenham and we had the women strikers from Ford's in Dagenham who themselves had won equal pay and thus won equal pay legislation.
Absolutely.
It was an object lesson to all of us, and it was a great meeting. I'm sure you'll agree with me.
I completely agree.
Thank you.
Okay, there we are. We'll finish on agreement on that.
They're great women. Great women.
Right, we've got time for one more, if you can keep this one as brief as possible, please. And very pertinent, as we're here in Cardiff. In Wales, this comes from Kath Hopkins in Cardiff. How does the Labour Party re-engage voters in Wales? Jeremy Corbyn, you'll start with this one, please.
Re-engaging voters by investment in public services, by investment in housing, by investment in health, but above all, investment in job opportunities. Recognising the good work done by the Government of Wales in dealing with the issues of homelessness, in dealing with the issues of ending the internal market within the NHS, helping children through school with breakfast clubs, many other practical ways of support, not punishing the people of Wales by underfunding the Government of Wales, which is what this government is doing, and also ensuring that the infrastructure investment that's being lost through the European Union, or potentially lost, is replaced by a UK government so that we do get the South East Wales Metro. And I would also like to see the Carmarthen to Aberystwyth rail link reopened.
Thank you very much,
In the
Jeremy
House
Corbyn.
tonight. Let's hear it for Carmarthen.
Okay,
Look,
Owen Smith.
I do it by having a Labour government in Westminster to work with our brilliant Labour government here in Wales. That's the key to it. Because if we had that, we could say, as I want to say, let's give Welsh workers the biggest boost in their wages that we've seen in a generation. Let's have a proper living wage of £8.25 an hour. Tomorrow, by having a Labour government at Westminster to deliver it. Let's invest in the NHS in Wales through increasing the budget to the Welsh Assembly. It's been cut every year by the Tories. Every single year they've cut our budget and forced us to make cuts within our public services. But the secret to doing all that, my friends, is a Labour government in Westminster to work with Carwyn and our comrades here in Wales. That's how we help Wales.
Thank you very much. Owen Smith. I'll ask you both on this, seeing as you both mentioned funding and money is important to us all. What is proper funding for Wales? Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, funding in Wales would be sufficient for maintenance of services that are needed in Wales, recognition of the levels of poverty that exist in many of the valley towns, and recognise the effects of 30 years of deindustrialisation ever since the end of the mining industry after the miners' strike in Wales. But it's also about investment in keeping industries such as a preparedness of government to intervene to ensure that Port Talbot stays open, to ensure that we have a maintenance of the steel industry in Wales, and a preparedness to take a public stake in it. It has to be fair funding across the whole of the UK. And the transport infrastructure issue in Wales is a massive one. I compliment the Welsh Government what it's tried to do. But quite honestly, it's utterly ridiculous that it's very difficult to travel, other than by car, from north to south Wales because of the inadequacy of the roads and the inadequacy of a rail system that simply doesn't connect one part of the country to the other.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Owen Smith. What is proper funding? Can you give us some details?
Well, I'd invest massively in Wales. I'd invest an extra £10 billion in infrastructure in Wales over a Parliament. We would get our fair share of that £200 billion New Deal. I'd invest an extra £1 billion a year in Wales in resource funding, through Wales getting their fair share of the £20 billion of extra taxes that I'd be levying on the wealthiest people in this country. Real, concrete proposals to spend real money on our communities. It would allow the Welsh Government to increase spending on the NHS by 4% in every year of the next Parliament. It would allow Wales to surpass the European averages for spending on the NHS, not fall below it, as we're doing right now, but to do all of that, we've got to be a Labour government. Carwyn Jones needs a Labour government at both ends of the M4. We all need a Labour government at both ends of the M4. That's how we end austerity, not by protesting, but by winning in Parliament.
OK, thank you very much. Time has beaten us, I'm afraid, and we've run out of time for questions. So we'll move on to the final bit of the night this evening, which is to give us your 2-minute closing pitches. Why are you the man for the job? We'll start with Owen Smith. 2 minutes, then, please, to explain to this audience.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, I think I've been clear tonight. I see that our country is in crisis. It's a crisis that has been long in the making, and a crisis that was dramatically compounded by that terrible vote on June the 23rd. We've seen wages collapse. We've seen job security collapse. We've seen the grossest levels of inequality this country has seen in a century. Our NHS is crumbling. Labour's legacy across Britain is being wiped out in this crisis. And at the same time, the Labour Party, when we are at our most needed in Britain, is in crisis ourselves. Divided, and in danger of being defeated. So the answer, my friends, is a Labour government that is ready to govern once more. A powerful, strong opposition to the Tories. A radical, credible Labour government in waiting, ready to implement a massive investment programme, ready to reindustrialise many parts of Britain, ready to give us the biggest boost to wages, a proper living wage, proper pensions for our hardest working people in public services and in the private sector. What we need is nothing less than the most radical, practical, socialist programme for government that we've seen since 1945. I am clear about that. That's the scale of the challenge we face, and that's the scale of the challenge we must set ourselves. And if you put your faith in me, if you elect me as the leader of the Labour Party, then I will deliver that. I will fight for and deliver the most radical programme we've seen in this country since the Great Labour Government of 1945. I promise you, I will deliver that, I will unite our party around it, and I will take us back to government. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Thank you all. Right. There'll be plenty of time for applause later. And can I now ask Jeremy Corbyn to sum up? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here at this hustings. It's been absolutely brilliant. We can win a general election, and we've been winning elections all this year. We won 4 parliamentary by-elections, 3 with a big swing to Labour. We won 4 mayoral contests. We got ahead of the Tories in the local government elections. We lost the general election in 2015, and it was a desperate, awful, bad, sad day. We lost, I believe, because we were not offering a clear enough alternative to the British people. It's not good enough to go on the doorstep and say, we'll make less cuts than they will, we'll have austerity, but it'll be austerity light. You've got to offer something different. A year ago, we were abstaining on the welfare reform bill, which cut £12 billion from the welfare budget. We should have been opposing that bill, and we have now become a party that has a clear economic alternative of something very different. And so, defeating the Tories on the personal independence payments, on the forced academisation of schools in England and other issues has been something that we've achieved when we've worked together. And this has also brought in a lot of new members to the party. Our membership hasn't just doubled, it's gone up from 200,000 to 540,000, the biggest membership there has ever been. We're a party that is active at all levels within our society and within our community. People are engaged in politics in a way they never were before. In the last election, only 47% of young people voted in that election. I regret that. They are paying the price. We're all paying the price of that. Mobilise and enthuse people. We go a lot further and a lot faster. The 10 points I put forward this morning were about full employment and many other things. But we rebuild to transform. No one, nowhere is left behind. Let us have faith in ourselves, our community, our party, and our ability to deliver real social justice all across this country.
Thank you. Thank you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Thank you all for your... Thank you all for your warm responses to both speeches to end there. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Can I thank Jeremy Corbyn and Owen Smith for opening the hustings here in Cardiff this evening. Can I thank you in the audience and you at home for sending your questions in and for a great debate. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.